guys, and welcome back for a new episode of Tenacious V's podcast. Every 2 weeks, I grab some drinks and some friends and a whole bunch of research that I've done, and we discuss the full life of an amazing woman from history, mythology, legend, story, just women throughout time. We want to know who they've been, how they've gotten us here, and how we all relate together. And so this week we're going to be talking about Joyce Diane Brothers. She is very famous for being the only woman ever to win the $64,000 question, which was a very popular game show in the 50s. And she was also known for being the person that basically invented and normalized popular psychology. She brought it to the forefront. She was tackling very complicated and untouched issues in society and helping people to come to terms with so many different things like sexuality and interpersonal relationships and just so many things that are still to this day hard and not talked about much in society. So we thank her for her work and appreciate what work is still left to come. In this episode, you can hear the dogs, my dogs Jade and Jax, being quite active in the background. So, sorry if that bothers you. It's not too loud, but it is there for sure. So just heads up. And we hope you guys really enjoy this one.
Hello, friends, and welcome back to another episode of Tenacious V's podcast. This week, we're going to be discussing Joyce Diane Brothers. Has anyone here heard of her?
I've not heard of Joyce Diane Brothers.
No, I haven't either.
It actually really surprises me. She's a really renowned psychiatrist and game show winner.
Oh, interesting. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
What game show?
Yeah.
It's called the $64,000 question.
Never heard of it.
It's an old game show, like black and white and everything.
So I used to watch like GSN back when I had cable, but
What is GSN?
Game Show Network.
Oh.
That's it, bro. It's just reruns of all like classic game shows.
Huh.
Yeah, whammy.
Maybe you saw it at one point and didn't even know.
Oh wow.
So she was born Joyce Diane Bauer on October 20th of 1927, and her parents were Morris K. Bauer and Estelle Rapport. They were both attorneys, and they shared a law practice together, so I thought that was kind of cool. Like, intelligent parents. She was raised in a Jewish household in Queens, New York, and then she also had a sister named Elaine Goldsmith, and the two were very close growing up. As a child, Joyce's father treated her as more of a son than a daughter and expected academic excellence from both of the girls in everything they did. She was described as a very studious person, thriving on hard work and academic achievement. She graduated high school in January 1944 from Far Rockaway High School. She then entered Cornell, where she was a Sigma Delta Tau with a double major in home economics and psychology. She graduated with honors in 1947.
That's cool. What do you... So I get that time, maybe that's a thing, but what do you do with a major in home ec?
I assume you become a housewife.
You just have a degree.
And if other degrees in psychology, then,
You're just...
you better watch it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess.
The ultimate housewife.
The ultimate housewife. She'll read them like a book.
So
who'd she marry? Who got all this, experience from the college years? Who's that poor sap?
What, like you could just talk him into being the best housewife? Like,
There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
There it is.
could you imagine doing that? You go through like this serious, like this rigorous education process to get these degrees, but your degree is a degree in being a housewife. That seems.
I thought it was really
quite
weird too.
ridiculous. Like,
Sounds like being an art student these days, in my opinion.
wow,
Pretty well put. Wow. Yeah.
Just saying.
Well said.
yeah, that's rough. That's true though.
Sorry, I'm not sorry.
So from 1949 to 1959, she was a researcher on a UNESCO leadership project, which is a pretty prestigious spot. And then in 1948, she had started her graduate studies at Columbia University. And from 48 to 53, she was also a research assistant for Columbia and an instructor at Hunter College. So she was pretty busy.
Very much so.
She got her PhD in psychology from Columbia in 1953.
Wow.
Her dissertation was called Anxiety Avoidance and Escape Behavior as Measured by Action Potential in Muscle. So, like, that's a lot, too. That's a lot. Just that sentence is a lot.
Sounds like an interesting dissertation, though. So, what does it really cover? Is that really just like how a person can avoid anxiety based upon your physical size?
Oh, it sounded to me like how during like periods of anxiety, somebody's muscles would react like maybe involuntarily or something like that too.
Physical.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, physical
Which
reaction
I
to an
have.
anxious situation.
Like,
Okay. Yeah.
totally.
That I mean, that's
Yeah,
a lot more reasonable too.
So I think it's more like talking about the built-up potential energy and muscle that can be released in an anxious situation, like, and avoiding anxiety by escaping, using that, like, potential energy.
Okay. Oh, alright.
I like that.
I like that too.
Fuck yeah.
That's my take
Definitely
on
not
it.
even what
I'd like to learn
No,
more.
Yeah.
I would like to hear a lot more about
Personally.
this.
Definitely. Yeah. So actually when Joyce was accepted to Columbia, the dean of psychology told her that although she was extremely qualified, she was taking the spot of a man who would actually use the degree, and she should give up her place so that a man could have it.
50s are fucking stupid. Why it's not even... We're getting like into the 50s, what, late 40s at this point then?
Yeah, she graduated in 53.
Oh, yeah. That sounds,
Sounds about right.
sounds about right for that time period, though.
Yeah. Though she
'Cause-
did clearly stay and get her PhD.
She did it. But, I mean, yeah. He thinks that she should have been using her home economic degree.
Yeah.
That sounds like the biggest fuck you pay me. Like,
So, Joyce actually also kind of thought she should use her home ec degree. She was pretty forward-thinking and pretty progressive, but she was pretty indoctrinated into the 50s society. And she did think that her husband should be the bacon-bringer-homer.
breadwinner.
The breadwinner. So she actually took 3 years to get her psychiatric license because, like I said, she did want to be a stay-at-home mom. They did have a little girl, so she stayed at home with their baby, which I think is a good thing, you know? Like, you put your career on hold for your child. But there was also times where women would ask her advice, like, 'cause she did advice columns and stuff, and they'd ask, like, when is my husband gonna start being interested in other women and, like, seeking out other women? And her answer to them would be, you should try to be more like those other women, so your husband's interested in you instead. Yeah.
Huh.
So, yikes.
Don't be yourself.
Don't-
Cater to.
Cater to your husband's tastes, essentially.
Oh, wow.
That was not her opinion always, though. That was pretty early on in her career, and it did change. In 1959, she started talking about the transgender community and trying to ease the public into a more accepting viewpoint, and, like, kind of easing society into, like, hey, this is a thing, and it's normal, and it's good, and we should accept these people and help them rather than being mean. And then In 1972, she began frequently speaking up for homosexuality and, like, gay rights and things like that. And then the same year, she became more involved in women's rights, and she testified in front of the Platform Committee on Women's Issues and was an acting chair of a U.S. delegation for the 16th Assembly of the Inter-American Commission of Women.
So she spent, I mean, this is a big gap, too.
That's
that
like
we're talking
20,
about.
Yeah.
Of her work. That's 20 years from her.
I'm going to fill in the
graduating.
gap, too, but...
Okay, so what we're doing, alright, we're doing one of those.
Just kind of an overview for starters.
Yeah, just a
Overview,
quick
and then we're
little,
gonna-
yeah.
Okay, because let's say, like, in a 20-year gap, that's a big difference. And, like, in that time, she goes from 50s values, like...
To 70s values.
Yeah, to what actually would be, like, the hippies, like, yeah, kind of...
So when exactly did she drop acid?
Not sure. So, in 1979, she went and talked to Congress about problems of middle-aged women, such as employment, retirement income, and anti-ageism in TV characters. She wanted to stop seeing 20-year-old women portraying 45-year-old women. So...
Fuck ageism.
Yeah. Back to 1949. Joyce married Milton Brothers, so he's the one that had to put up with all her college training. And then he later became an internist, which is a doctor who specializes in internal medicine. But at the time, he was a medical intern making about $50 a month, which
So,
was...
He was interning to be an internist?
Yeah. So, the $50 a month was not doing their family much. And then they had a daughter in 1952, and that did not make anything any easier. And so, to escape what she called a slum-like walk-up apartment, she entered the game show, The $64,000 Question. It was one of the top shows at the time and paid more than any other show out there. So, to get on the show, she had to write a letter about herself, her hobbies, why she'd be a good candidate, and what she would use the money for. She got an interview with the producer, and she mentioned her psychology and home ec background in the letter, which meant they couldn't ask her about those topics on the show. Because you can't be an expert, like, it can't be related to, like, your degree or your career.
Mm-hmm.
So... Considering the customary gender roles of the 1950s, the producer thought that he would get the best ratings if he gave her a masculine topic that she, like, shouldn't know about. And she was a smart lady, so she suggested boxing.
Hell yeah.
Her husband was a big fan, and she knew it was a finite source of knowledge. Like, there's only so much you can learn about boxing. And so this lady was like, I got 2 degrees already, I'm really driven, I'm good at studying. So before she even applied, she spent 6 weeks learning as much as she possibly could about boxing. And then, like, when they accepted her to the show, she's like, I just need a little bit of time to study, like, blah, blah, blah. So they gave her 2 months, and she just did nothing but, like, read boxing magazines and watch boxing matches, and she went to, like, live boxing. Yeah,
Oh, that
she
sounds
did everything
awesome
she could.
way to spend time.
Yeah.
A great way to spend time. And call it work.
Hell yeah. Fuck yeah.
Yeah. So she actually also got to work with the writer Nat Fleischer, and the former Olympic boxing champion Edward P.F. Egan. So she was, like, actually speaking with boxers and, like, learning from them about everything she could, reading encyclopedias, just anything she could get her hands on with the word boxing. They really didn't want her to win the show. They just kind of wanted the ratings of having her on it at all. And so they were, like, throwing her trick questions and, like, trying to trip her up and all sorts of things. And she ended up winning it.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
I actually watched an
yeah.
episode of it this morning, and it's wild, you guys.
So
Like,
this is something you can YouTube.
yeah, you can find it on YouTube. You can find the thing on there, and the game show host is all, like, 1950s, like, hey, ladies, let me show you around.
So just white Steve Harvey?
Yeah.
So, if anybody listening wanted to check it out, then YouTube, what would be a good YouTube video to...
So you can YouTube the $64,000 question, Joyce Brothers. And it should bring up, like, I think it's a series of 4 episodes
Awesome.
that comprise her winning, because they do, like, $1,000 and then $2,000 and then $4 and then $8 and then
Oh, fucking
16 and 32 and yeah.
Awesome. Okay, cool.
Yeah. So she won, and it was pretty awesome. She was the only woman to ever win the show.
Fuck yeah.
That's badass.
Cool.
Yeah.
But it sounds like it was kind of set up to be that way. So
Yeah, it does. Yeah,
Just
it really does.
She beat the system, but it sounds like they didn't want her to win. They didn't want to even put that image out there.
Yeah.
Definitely didn't want
time.
to take the money. You know.
She just beat the odds because she knew.
Yeah.
She played them too.
Totally.
She did it right for sure.
This woman don't know more than us, and she just played them from the get go.
Yeah.
Already had the knowledge. Was like, yo, I need a little bit more time. They're like, you know what? Take all the time you need. I think I shit on this. She's like, all right, thank you for that. Yes, I will consult it.
They're
With
big,
my home ec degree on boxing.
Fucking A.
their like biggest thing that they used to try and trip her up was this is actually the one I watched, was they asked her about 4 famous referees of boxing, and it is like the most obscure fucking question. It's like, what is the name of the ref from the 2013 World Cup?
There wouldn't be one because the World Cup wasn't held in 2013. Boom!
Oh, okay, but you
Nailed
know, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I got
Like,
you. I got you.
it was
No,
just,
he did get you.
Yeah.
That's exactly it.
he did get me, but
Okay,
there was
I understand.
so there was
that.
4 referees like that, where it's just like the most specific, like they
Sure.
were like this one game or whatever or
Sure.
match, and so they asked her that question, and
She was
they
nailing
repeat it twice, and then she's like, "Okay, well, could you maybe like repeat all of them really slowly?" And so he says the first one, and she's like, "It's him," and he's like, "Correct," and then he says the
Yeah.
second one, and she's like, "This guy," and he's just like, "Correct," and she gets them all, and
Can't
he's
take
like,
it.
"Oh wow, you got him!" Like,
Fuck yeah.
yeah.
Go
Yeah,
Joyce.
Who'd have thunk you guys were shady?
Definitely.
A shady game show?
A game show?
No
Look at
way.
this guy's suit. It's a t-shirt in the back.
They had a little bit more showmanship in the 50s.
Clip-on ties.
Smoke and mirrors.
Smoke and mirrors. Yeah. So after the show aired, she was actually considered an official expert on boxing.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
That's actually super cool.
Yeah.
That's better than the well, I don't know. That's a lot of money back then, but that's
lot of
still a good
That's
winning
a lot of
too.
money. Totally.
So 2 years later, she was asked to come back to the $64,000 challenge, which pitted previous winners of the $64,000 question against experts.
Uh-huh.
And she beat out 7 other players and won that shit again.
All men?
Damn.
All
Well,
men?
I mean,
well, they
yeah,
must have
'cause
been
no other
because-
women had
that's
ever won.
right, okay.
Well, they could have been women. She was just the one that
No,
shut
because
down.
No other woman had ever won it.
And
Had
this
never
was
won.
And this was the champion.
Oh, but it's champ.
That's
So it was
right.
all the champ. Okay, never
Yeah,
mind. Bracketed
fucking
by
hell.
champ. Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
so they only brought back winners.
My bad. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So both of the shows later on ended up with cheating scandals, though Joyce was investigated and found to be totally honest. No cheating involved. She just learned all that shit about boxing.
Well, yeah, she studied. They gave her 2 extra months on top of what she'd been doing.
Yeah, she studied for 3.5 months. But I mean, she
Kinda
became an
like-
expert in 3.5 months.
Yeah, and while that is impressive, I'm not trying to like say that that's not impressive. That was exactly for 3.5 months that she lived, ate, and just breathed hockey.
Boxing.
Same sport. See where my bias lies.
Well,
See
but
where my bias lies. I love it. Boxing.
she was also taking care of her home and a new baby.
She didn't have the new baby, but like she still had time to meet famous boxers. She still had time to like to show up to all these events. To find out which referees were doing this, she wasn't just watching boxing matches on TV. She wasn't even just watching VHS tapes. She was sitting there rewinding. She was seeing who's what, writing it down, taking notes, studying that.
Flashcards.
Straight up.
Flashcards.
3 months. It's a
Maybe
lot
she
of
had the
work,
baby
but-
hold up the flashcards.
especially then,
Smart
like,
baby.
and like national known, like sports knowledge was finite. Just as a whole, was finite then. Like you said, she chose that because that's one of the slimmest sports things you could do. So she just was better than the competition. Her
Yeah.
studying was just better than the game show was willing to put in time.
Yeah. I mean, she killed it.
Yeah. But I don't know. It's like a fucking, I don't know, like an angle, I guess. I don't know how you put that, like how to describe that, I guess, but it's because it's so much more narrow back then. 3 months was enough time to know everything about it. Whereas 3 months now would be nothing because of how much more history's happened since then. And it's like an exponential growth since then. But then 3 months was probably enough time, whereas 3 years wouldn't even be the same thing now.
Okay. I see what you're saying, yeah. So, her first win on the show actually led her to being the color commentator for CBS for the Carmen Basilio and Sugar Ray Robinson, which made her the first female boxing commentator as well.
That's fucking amazing. Hell yeah, Sugar Ray.
Yeah. So in 1956, she started co-hosting the sports showcase with journalist Max Case, making her also one of the first ever female sports commentators, just in general, like long term.
Sportscaster.
Yeah.
It's
Not
insane.
the first, one of the first.
Yeah.
That'd be such an awesome job.
Sportscaster?
Hell yeah.
Wouldn't it? But I also think about it.
Yeah.
Like, it'd be so much fun, but I feel like I'm garbage at just this. I don't know if I could imagine that on, like, a major level. Could you imagine mispronouncing someone's name?
I don't know. I feel like it's a lot easier when I'm like watching a sport I enjoy and like know the players and know the teams and like, and maybe I got company there that isn't familiar with it. Like, I fucking like love. Like, I probably won't shut the fuck up. Like,
Yeah.
when that's going on. So like,
Yes,
that
that
would
would
be an
be
awesome job. And
You'd
she
have to
fucking
love the
got
sport
that.
that you're working for, though, too. Like you said, you'd have to love
Well,
that sport.
how could she study boxing like this and not develop a love for the sport?
It's true.
Yeah.
That is true. You don't do it, yeah.
Well, plus her husband already had a passion for it, so I'm sure it was
She's
really
familiar
easy for
with
her
it
to
at the
get into
get-go.
it.
Yeah, totally.
Like, she had somebody to relate with and somebody she
And
was
after a
already
while,
very
she knew
close
more
to.
than her hubby about it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, no, she's remembered more.
There
For
you go.
sure,
There you
especially.
go.
She's done some stuff about it. Like, yeah, that would... So, I don't know, it would be a lot of fun.
Fucking
Yeah, be a good job. I mean, not for me, but for you guys, yeah.
No, I don't know. I think I'd hate being a hockey telecaster.
Yeah,
You
because
guys
you'd
love
have
being a
to
soccer
do it for
telecaster.
all the teams and not just your team.
I'd be such a homer. I'd just be like everyone on NBC.
So, Joyce was happy to be working and breaking glass ceilings all over the place, but she really wanted to be utilizing her psychology background. So, she was able to do this on a local afternoon radio talk show on NBC, speaking of, and she would read letters sent in by listeners and, like, give advice based on their questions and stuff. So, it's basically like an advice column, but you listen to it. Yeah. She was also on all sorts of talk shows, so people could get to know the lady behind the advice columns. And she appeared on The Tonight Show, starring Johnny Carson, more than 90
Oh, yeah,
times.
Carson.
More than 90 fucking times.
More than 90?
More
Holy
than 90.
shit. That's
Damn.
a lot because the Late Night with Johnny Carson was probably the biggest show. Fucking.
It's a big deal.
Arsenio Hall, too.
Well, this was
She-
before Arsenio Hall.
Was it?
Arsenio Hall was in like the 80s, man.
She was on that, too. I actually watched
But
a clip of her on that
but
show.
fucking Johnny
Arsenio
Carson
Hall.
was as early as I think the late 60s, man.
Yeah.
Fucking,
Wait, I thought they did have a crossover time, but
it's quite possible. But yeah, Johnny Carson was like the fucking original, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
The original Tonight Show.
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
She was on it over 90 times.
Damn, 90 times.
That's insane. And on Arsenio Hall.
And on Conan. And
Conan!
Good Morning America, Today, Entertainment Tonight,
Conan!
CNN,
Conan.
and more.
Conan O'Brien rules.
I actually watched
Yeah,
her
because
on
you
the
like
Conan
I
episode.
know, you love The Simpsons.
Yeah, he wrote some of the best Lisa episodes.
He
Lisa
did.
Simpson episodes. Conan
Oh,
O'Brien
we
was
got-
a writer.
He was a
We
fucking
gotta
great
watch-
writer in the golden age of The Simpsons.
We gotta watch her on the Conan episode together then, because I watched it earlier and it's funny.
Down.
It's really funny.
A lot of people hate him, but yeah, Conan O'Brien's fucking hilarious. I don't give a shit.
So, almost every time she was on the Johnny Carson show, she would give a psychological analysis of society's current social climate. So, like, commentating on things that were, like, going on in the world and affecting people and, like, this is how you may be feeling right now. And, like, for example, with the coronavirus, like, she'd be on there talking about this.
Well,
and,
with
like,
her, but I was going to say that made me think, like, with her, like, active work with, you know, transgendered people and people in the LGBT community, like, all over, maybe that was, like, a way for her to, like, include, like, discussion about these topics, like...
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, for sure.
As well as, like, sexuality and, like, normalizing, like, menopause and talking about menstruation.
Oh,
and,
right, because it wasn't... People weren't as open about that stuff.
Yeah.
At the time.
Also, just, like, talking about, like, contraceptives and things, like, in public was something that she was trying to normalize. Just, like, anything that can, like, cause you social anxiety, basically. She's like, hey... Right. This is a normal human function. We should all talk about it. Everyone does it. Everyone's involved in this. Like,
it's just a 50s heretic. Like,
yeah,
just the epitome.
Well, that goes
of it.
back to what her dissertation was about too.
That's it, man.
With how people like react, like in anxious situations.
Oh, it seems like she's probably good to control it in order to bring these things to that point. Bring it up without creating that kind of fucking hysteria or like even. Creating a more accepting environment.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I think you're totally right with, like she built a platform to bring a lot of other issues.
Totally.
Well, and a lot of it was like just going out and being like, okay, so I'm going to give the coronavirus example again, where like if she were to go on TV right now, she'd probably give a little speech about what's happening and how it's like affecting different people, and then kind of go on and be like, so... if you're feeling anxiety about this, that's totally normal. If you're feeling this about it, that's totally normal. Like, if you're scared or upset, don't be, like, beating yourself up. That's normal. This isn't a scary situation. No one knows what's going to happen. Your brain is responding in a normal way. Just to make people realize, like, oh, just because I have these feelings, like, doesn't make me crazy or whatever.
Right. Just going to quell that anxiety a little bit.
Yeah, kind of normalize, like, the mental health stigmas as well, and, like, seeking therapy, like, making that not such a scary thing.
Sure, definitely.
So, in August of 1958, she had landed a non-sports show on a New York station. The show was an advice show about relationships where she took audience questions, and the producers and sponsors were very nervous of how people would respond to a TV psychologist. But everyone loved it. People were so grateful to have access to this information that they couldn't really get anywhere else. And it just shows that access to mental health support and knowledge is always really important. And, like, the more it's suppressed, the more people, like, subconsciously seek it out and need it. I think.
Interesting.
I don't know, my take on it is the fact that people were like, oh my god, you're talking about, like, things that happen in my brain and, like, no one else has told me about this? Like, I think that's a pretty big deal.
Definitely, especially at the time, because, like, how, like, broad of an audience TV could reach as opposed to other
Anything
forms of
else?
media at the time, yeah.
Yeah. She did it really smart, for sure.
Definitely.
So then in 1973, Joyce got her second very own talk show, sort of. The German company Host wanted to advertise their new fabric, Travera polyester, so they gave Joyce a show called Living Easy with Dr. Joyce Brothers. The entire set was Travera fabric, and Joyce was always bringing up fashion. The show was guest interviews, musical performances, how-to demos, and a weekly psychology segment. The show had 200 shows in 3 years on 150 stations.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
It's a very wide audience.
Yeah. But it was pretty controlled by the fabric company that it was, like, run by. And so most of it was fashion advice, and, like, a lot of it had to be brought back to that kind of thing.
Sure.
So the fans didn't really like that. Like, people weren't big on that. Everyone was like, why isn't she using more of her psychology expertise? Why isn't she talking more about that? That's the part we want. Mm-hmm. And so the show ended up not...
canceled.
Yeah, it got canceled. In 1985, Joyce got a new show, and it was 16 one-hour shows with a comedian, a guest star, and calls from people with psychology questions. She answered everything with her best possible advice, with the goal of educating the masses and normalizing psychology and mental health.
That's awesome.
Yeah. That was like her whole thing, her entire career. So the show was very family friendly as it was shown on the Disney Channel, and it was her first cable appearance ever. Yeah. So her broadcasting career overall lasted over 40 years and had her appearing on TV and radio with many different shows of her own and on all sorts of other people's shows.
Yeah. Sports, game shows, everything.
Talk
all
shows.
the good genres.
Yeah. Her many shows discussed things like the psychology of football, changing clothing styles, HIV and AIDS, school shootings, relationship advice, and more. She brought psychology to the mainstream and is given a lot of credit for creating pop psychology.
Incredible.
Pretty much all the credit for creating pop psychology.
That's a lot of work, and that's... I mean, yeah, of course, I'm personally going to take it that way, too. That's one of the coolest things I've ever heard. It's super important, especially in our culture here.
Yeah.
Like, it's extremely important that we have that.
Kind of crazy that they're remembered more for their game show winnings than they are their work in psychology.
Right?
Like medical help, truly helping people, doing something. But yeah, the game show, that kind of sums up our culture perfectly.
It does.
And why it took her whole career to get there.
Well said. Yeah.
It's fucking true. That is cool.
Well, actually, it didn't really take her whole career. I think this, more than anything else, shows how massively famous she was at the time. When the Beatles first ever landed in America in 1964, she met them and, like, hung out and took publicity photos and, like, went on a show with them. Like, I know we're not big Beatles fans, but that's still a really big deal at the time.
At the time, that is a huge deal.
So, along with her massive digital media career, Joyce also had quite a long literary career. She kept up with a column in Good Housekeeping for 4 decades, and a syndicated newspaper column that started in the 70s. At one point, it was printed in over 350 different newspapers worldwide. That's insane. She was also an author of many different books, including What Every Woman Should Know About Men and Widow, which was inspired by the loss of her husband to bladder cancer in 1989. So, although her work made great strides in destigmatizing psychiatry and therapy for anyone and not just those struggling with mental health, and her shows made people realize that psychiatrists are not just scary doctors, they're also just people like you and me.
They're also not quacks.
Yeah, they're normal people. And honestly, the few appearances of her I did see earlier, like, she's very intelligent. Like, she's absolutely somebody that I would trust with my mental health. And
right.
Yeah, she's, like, witty.
Well, 'cause
and
in the time she was growing up, like, the whole idea of someone, like, in that career was that, like, this is, you know, the same as, like, a fortune teller. Like, this is, like, all, like, hokey quack doctor bullshit.
Yeah.
It is a quack thing. Like,
yeah.
my physician still, like, she grew up around the time, she's a physician, still doesn't believe in mental health.
There it is.
Because, coming, part of the world she was in, that still didn't reach there, you know? Like, doesn't, still, like, that is a thing amongst a lot of people. It is, like, witch doctor shit.
Exactly.
It's not a thing, you know? Like, it's all...
What her work shows that, you know, it actually...
Yeah, especially the devotion to it that she's put into it, all this. But it's also just doctors in general, and like just seriously taking medical field was a man's field at that time. So her to be taken seriously, she did. She seems like she kind of had like these wacky like appearances in order to just promote.
She does seem kind of quirky and kooky.
Just in order to build an audience, though.
Exactly.
To say these things that are super important.
She's actually, like, very serious and put together.
Really?
Like,
okay.
yeah. Her demeanor is very, like, stoic, and she holds the conversation very grounded. And
well, let me put it like this then. She reminds me of the old lady who used to talk about sex on fucking like
Dr. Ruth.
Dr. Ruth.
Love Dr.
Like,
Ruth
that's
so much.
like kind of
Yes.
what how she like kept things lighthearted, knew her shit, but it wasn't like, and you know, she was like serious about what she was talking about, but she was kind of quirky and kooky and fun. Like,
Absolutely.
And that's kind of
Well, and her whole thing was
know
that
that.
she broke down all the things behind the psychology and the science and the technicalities into things that everyone can understand, like
Cool.
into basic layman's terms, and she made it like this really complicated theory,
Concepts.
this really complicated concept she could take and make really basic and easy to understand for like anyone.
Just like why we love Bill Nye. He would
Yeah.
take these massive...
write it out on crayon.
Yeah, and then make it a thing.
Yeah.
That was easy, but that's it too. Like, you know, from these game shows, which is like we saying, it's fucked up that that's what she's known for. But you do that, you build a personality kind of platform too, and then people just want to listen to you. When they
Right.
hear these things you're saying, when you can speak to them and teach them something like that from the ground up.
Right.
Yeah, like take basic concepts and make them make sense without oversimplifying them to something that makes you more ignorant.
Yeah.
Like, that is incredible. That's what you do. That's why I make these like scientists, you know, superstars. Because that like it hurts on them growing up. Einstein that was it. The guy was a fucking movie star essentially. Like,
Yeah.
and that's gotta be cool. But the way that he's always portrayed himself too, and anytime you think of Einstein, it's a fucking goofball.
Yeah.
See that
People
picture
get
with his
lost.
tongue sticking
Yeah.
out?
You get lost crossing the street. Like,
So, you guys are right. Yeah, she was very well liked, and people liked her, audiences liked her. Other psychiatrists did not like her, and other psychologists did not like her.
doesn't seem like she's ever been really well accepted amongst her peers in anything now. It seems like she has succeeded, and the way it seems is like they don't think that she should have. I'm just speaking on like what I'm seeing here, and this is just up till this point too.
So, they didn't like what she was doing, and they didn't agree with her because, for one thing, she didn't have a clinical degree. She did have a psychologist license and a PhD, but she didn't have the clinical degree to work one-on-one with patients. And her advice was for strangers that she had no background on, not patients.
There's a difference between advice and like, psychological help.
Yeah, and like a study of like a subject. Like this is just like what she was doing to me seems like it was more of like a broad like scope of like, you know, these are general ideas like about I guess mental situations. No, it wasn't anything like that.
Well, there were
she-
advice columns.
Yeah.
People call in with what they needed advice on, but
Right,
you're
and
getting
it was like
from
a general like, you know, overview of these things, and
yeah.
so like she, I think in a way like they just didn't like that, you know. I guess in a way it could be seen that their work was being discredited because at the time, like I was saying before, it was seen as like a, you know,
Kind of
quack
quirky.
work, and because these, you know, other doctors had these patients, I assume that like the whole deal for them was, oh, because this is like a general thing, it's discrediting our work that's actual studying on like specific individuals.
Because you can compare like real psychiatric help or psychological help to this lady on TV,
Right.
and that's, you know, I mean, that could be a thing, but that's not. I wouldn't say that's on her. That's like getting mad at Dr. Oz
There you
for
go.
fucking morons that are like, this guy knows what he's saying, man. I watched him this morning, and I know why my tumor's growing.
Or like the
type
master
shit.
magician who like reveals like magic tricks on TV.
Or Penn and Teller, yeah.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
Yeah, totally. And, you know, the other, like, professionals are like, fuck you, you're, like, you know, taken away from the whole...
It's your fault for comparing
Yeah.
this, but advice, like, I think advice is something that humans just give to another, and that's weird to, like, relate it to your career that way, like, because if someone asked me for advice, totally, man, I'm going to give you that. I'm going to give you what I think, even if I don't fucking know you. Say I don't know you. My advice, compared to someone with a fucking degree though, a PhD in psychology,
Yeah.
and you want to ask him like some questions about your life,
Yeah.
and you want to put us next to each other. The thing is, I can get my own fucking radio show too, just because I'm hilarious. But like this dude, you should probably listen to that guy more,
It's true.
or that woman, whoever.
Sure.
Listen to them because they're gonna actually give you some real advice. Whether or not this is not a patient doctor situation, but you're still gonna get much better advice off her than from some dude like me that would take the same fucking job to fill up time slots in the radio.
Well said.
Well, and I think just the fact that people were being open enough to come forth and ask these questions to somebody in the psychology degree was a pretty big deal.
For sure.
But they were just thinking it was like, I mean, I get their thought on it too. It's like doctors performing tests on the street, you know, like for extra cash.
I don't think it's like that though. That's why I'm saying I get what they're saying, but it's not like that. It's not like that.
Okay, I mean, I'm agreeing with you. I don't think it's like that either. Like,
I feel it because that's what my assumption was of them trying to, like what they were trying to say it as, but it's not like moonlighting. It's not. This ain't Scrubs, like doing roadside medical nonsense just for some extra cash. This is getting still a platform, just building a platform and putting this out there. And you know what? You are the better person to be giving advice out than someone else that would be in that same slot doing this. So to be mad about that, like it doesn't. I don't think it makes you guys look worse. I think it brings more to this and opens up the community. I think they're mad because she's getting more well known, and they're still holding on to that same '50s mentality of like, well, I'm a doctor. I'm a doctor. She's just someone with a degree. Like, you know what I mean? I think the way it seems to me, it'd be a lot deeper than that. But why would you not want people helping someone?
I don't know. They didn't, though, and many American Psychological Association members made efforts to revoke her membership, although they all failed. But, yeah, they were really against it.
The APA has been pretty fair, I know, over the years, but they also make plenty of mistakes, especially since her time to now. The revisions that have been made amongst things they decide, you know. Times change, and it takes people like that to change.
In 1958, she actually discussed the process of her shows with Roger Turtle, and she said that she spent 15 hours prepping for each 1-hour episode. She would consult with other experts, breaking down complex psychology into layman terms, like we talked about, and then they would also do like scientific research, so they were trying to back it up as best they could. And she was getting input from other psychologists and experts in the field as well to like back her claims and just kind of have her back, I guess. The show explicitly stated often that psychology is a tool, not an entertainment source, and people should seek therapy if they feel they need it. So I don't think she was doing any harm to the field of psychology. I think those doctors were just a little, oh, I am a doctor.
Agreed.
So I'm with you. I was just,
especially with all that, it sounds exactly like it.
Yeah.
To me, that sounds like it. And you know what? Nothing. I guess it's not fair. Entertainment can be taken from anything. Entertainment can be taken from anything, and it gets taken from many things. Many of us have watched medical videos, actual medical videos that have taught you something. Alright, and I'll tell you right now, I've seen, like, just the first time I remember seeing, like, birth. Alright? It's gruesome. Alright? Weird for a kid. If you have Bill Nye try to explain that, probably been a lot more easier to digest and probably more regulated. I'm just saying, so it's not... You can simplify things for people, and especially when you're trying to introduce new ideas without damaging the reputation of that or the seriousness of it. And it's mental health is not entertainment, as no one's health is, but it is from the outside. It is fascinating to everyone. I think everyone is fascinated by that. You want to know how the human body works.
definitely.
I think that's just curiosity, and that's the mind is just part of it. It's just such a specialized thing. It's its its own entity aside from the body. That's why we have specialists. And so we're just as fascinated with that. Why would you not want someone explaining that to you in a way that can keep your attention and get you to learn about it, to actually understand it? I don't think it's insulting or degrading to the thing. I think it's probably the best boost.
I agree. And she felt the same way. She felt she was doing the right thing, and she was opening up people's minds to turbulent issues and hopefully inspiring people to seek needed help.
Fucking awesome. I agree. She did the best.
She was great. After the Columbine shooting in 1999, Joyce was a huge proponent of gun control on CNN. And many people considered her a public crisis counselor. As, like I said earlier, she would reach out and talk about things like Princess Diana's death or Columbine or Challenger exploding, things that like affected thousands of people on a massive scale.
Massive tragedies.
Yeah, massive
Huge
tragedies.
things.
So like right now, she would be so welcome and needed in our world to just kind of come on and be like, hey, she has a very soothing voice too. But like come on and be like, hey guys, everything you're feeling is normal. I love you. Things are gonna be okay.
And then she'd be
Calm
fired
down.
right on the stage. Because that's our motto. That's it.
So, sadly, Joyce died on May 13th of 2013 from a respiratory failure in her Fort Lee, New Jersey home.
Sick old ladies.
In her life, she received the Woman of Achievement Award from the Federation of Jewish Women in 1964, the Professional Woman of the Year from the Business and Professional Women's Club in 1968, and she was also given the award of the Parkinson's Disease Foundation. She also received an honorary degree from Franklin Pierce College in 1969. She said she took great joy in life from taking her grandchildren on individual adventures, especially after her husband died. She also said in an interview that I watched that women are partially to blame for men being uncomfortable with their feelings because women are also still uncomfortable with men who have feelings. And it was a really interesting take. Yeah, because she was just saying, like, at the time there was, like, a presidential candidate who had, like, shed a single tear talking about his wife on TV, like, some situation they were going through. And everyone thought, like, oh, wow, like, women are gonna love this. Everyone's gonna vote for him. Like, he showed his vulnerable side. Like, people are gonna be all about it. And his ratings, like, the next day plummeted. They just shot down because everyone was like, I don't want a man that's gonna cry and be weak in office. And even women felt that way. Like, they didn't want a weak man in office, so.
I've definitely heard that a lot just in my time.
Well, and I think it's just really interesting that she had that, like, side of mind to be like, yeah, no one in society is ready for men with feelings. That's why it's such an uncomfortable thing still. Like, no one is accepting of it, so it's not showing itself.
Society's been built, and it's not just... It isn't just men propagating it. It's a society, and it's like an intangible thing, almost, that seems to keep the perpetuation of the masculinity. It's not... No one I really know. No one, anyone else really knows that I know. That's also something. But, you know, people aren't going to be that way because that's still just the air of the culture.
Yeah.
It is like, that's something that just takes time to combat almost. It does. It takes, you know, same bit of dedication, bravery on individuals' parts.
It takes that slow normalization.
Yeah. And that is a bummer, but that is lame.
That is lame. Ladies, be more accepting of men crying.
That's important.
Men, be more accepting of yourselves crying.
Oh, I think that's not part of it. Everyone's on board with that one. We had a meeting.
Huh?
We cried about it.
Yeah, we had a whole meeting. We already did that.
You two had a meeting?
All of us.
The men.
The men.
Oh, the men. Well, thank you guys so much for listening, and we hope you have a great day.
Thanks for listening. If you liked that, check us out on social media. You can find us at Tenacious V's Podcast. Or better yet, just go tell a friend. Nothing can happen without friends. You can listen to us on pretty much any hosting site except for iTunes. We're working on it. And each episode is written and produced by Nona, with music by Leche. Will, Johnny, and other friends join in all the discussions. Thank you so much, and we hope to hear back from you soon.